Hello, welcome to the You at Your Best podcast. I'm your host, Morgan. This week's episode is going to be a little bit different than the past couple of episodes. The past couple of episodes have been inside episodes, even though I haven't been saying it because I've been forgetting. But this episode is going to be more of a reflection episode. I'm just going to be talking about an experience that I had yesterday, actually. Before I get into anything, last night I had one of those moments where everything I thought I had figured out all of a sudden felt shaky. I started questioning a lot of things that I worked so hard to gain, specifically my self-compassion. I started questioning if me being kind to myself was actually me distracting myself from healing and growing. It turns out that wasn't what was happening at all. I needed that kindness to get out of what was going on yesterday. But I went to therapy yesterday and I had a really big moment. I reconnected with my past self whenever I was in college. The version of me I talked about a couple of episodes back, I considered that time the worst year of my life. Thinking back, it wasn't actually 2022. It was more of like 2022 and 2023, but I'm still keeping it as 2022 so that that episode isn't confusing. That time in my life was really hard, and a moment in therapy brought me back to that time in my life. I started feeling a lot of the emotions that I felt then, and it scared me. To make this less confusing, the story of it's going to be kind of all over the place. I'm going to start yesterday and then at one point go back in time to a couple of weeks ago and a couple of days ago. Yesterday morning, before I went to therapy, I was dreading it. I dread it every time. To be completely honest, I was stressing and I felt really bad because I thought that I needed to tell him that I didn't need to see him anymore, and I was really scared about that. I'm really scared of confrontation. It turns out that wasn't what was happening. That wasn't the fear that I was feeling, but I could tell that there was something that I needed to do, and I didn't know what that thing was. So I really struggled with just this intense sense of dread before I went to see him. Turns out what I needed wasn't to tell him that I wanted to stop seeing him. It was to tell him why I was in therapy, what I came there for, because I kind of forgot about it, and for a long time I was letting him take the lead, and therapy didn't feel like it was benefiting me. It felt like I was paying $45 every visit just to try to think of something to say, try to keep the conversation going, instead of me openly being myself and openly saying what I wanted and what I needed. And that thing that I needed was to talk more about any kind of diagnoses I have, because I thought that he had diagnosed me with OCD, but he didn't. I think it was more of a miscommunication or like me misunderstanding what he was saying, but I am not officially diagnosed with anything except for depression and anxiety. And it kind of shocked me. I didn't even say that to him, but I was like, oh, I've been talking on my podcast about OCD because I thought that I was diagnosed, but I think I misunderstood it. But I wanted to talk more about stuff like that because we had been spending a lot of our sessions talking about things that I didn't really feel were helpful, not because he was doing anything wrong like I originally thought, but because I wasn't expressing what I needed and what I wanted out of fear of disappointing him. So I told him about that, and I was terrified, but I did it, and the sense of dread for that thing went away, and I felt safe. I felt comfortable because he made me feel good about openly expressing something to him that I was so scared to share. The session overall was just really meaningful, really helpful, really opened my eyes, but it also really terrified me. It triggered a lot of emotions. It brought me back in time. I'm going to read a part from my journal whenever I was explaining it because I'm having a little bit of a hard time explaining it now, so reading it might be a little bit easier. We also talked about my future and where I see myself in the next 5 and 10 years. That freaked me out a little bit because the thought of going back to college is terrifying. Basically what I realized and what I was so scared of being true is I want to be a therapist. I truly do. I think it's something that's really important to me. And while this podcast is so important to me and I don't ever want to stop working on this podcast, I think I'm meant to be a therapist, and I've known that since high school. That's what I went to college for, but my anxiety was so bad that I dropped all of my classes and gave up on college. And then it goes back to a couple of weeks ago, I started listening to a song that I related really deeply to whenever I was in college, and that's Dear God by Nessa Barrett. It brought back feelings that I haven't felt as intensely since I dropped all of my classes. So extreme anxiety, intense self-hatred, intense self-doubt. I felt lost, like I had no purpose, like there was no point in me existing. And I found myself lingering on it for a long time. It took me a full day. And I actually have another journal entry talking about that. So I'm going to read it really quick. I listened to a Nessa Barrett song that I deeply related to back then, meaning college, Dear God, while on my way to get Hunter from work. I really connected with her, Ode Morgan. She was there, but I saw her separate from me. I'm learning that connecting with yourself as a whole means seeing past yous as someone else first. That gives you the chance to have an outside perspective first, so that the empathy and love can come through. Her and I will become a whole one day, but not yet. Before we picked up Clemmy is my daughter, by the way. Hunter and I had to go get a new brake light. When we walked into the store, I started making myself feel better. I had been letting the difficult feeling stay because I had it in me, but by the time I walked into the store, I was ready to let her go, at least for the time being. So I made myself feel better. I changed my mindset, reminded myself that the current me is no longer her, and I have abilities to pull myself out of hard times and negative headspaces that she didn't have, meaning whenever I was in college. I'm a mother now. I have more important things to focus on than just me, which is healing. I started being nice to and engaging with Hunter in the way that current me does, because that day, and a pattern that I have whenever I'm really struggling, my mind goes straight to there's something wrong with my relationship. So I take it out on him. I grounded myself in presence and I focused on how the store looked. And then whenever we went outside, while Hunter and the worker were fixing the light, I looked at the sky, the cars driving by, felt how good the cold air felt on my body. Then we left to go get Clemmy. The wound was fresh. I was still moving back into current me, but I felt a little better. That was basically that experience. That was what happened. Okay, and stay with me. I know this is kind of all over the place, but now I'm going to skip back to a couple of days ago, whenever I started listening to a podcast that I listened to whenever I was in college, and it's Mindset Magic Manifestation, I think. Hang on, let me look. Yeah, Mindset Magic and Manifestation by Michaela J. The episode that I was listening to was talking about how our deepest fears and the thing that we're so scared to look at is the one thing that is holding us back. I knew then that there was something. I didn't know what it was, but in that moment, I felt connected with past me, not only because the fears that I felt then were still coming back, but also because I had listened to that podcast at that time. And then whenever I had this therapy session, we talked about college and me wanting to become a therapist. And all of those things happening brought me back into that headspace that I was in then. Well, not necessarily the headspace. It brought back the emotions that I felt then. The intense anxiety, self-doubt, self-hatred, feeling lost and like I don't know myself or like I don't have purpose. I felt this overwhelming feeling of doom and negativity. It scared me because I thought that I was going back to who I was. I thought that everything that I had learned, all of the self-compassion that I had learned, all of the stuff I learned over time through motherhood, I thought that all of that was just a distraction and it wasn't real. That was just me distracting myself from the fact that I am holding myself back from something that I truly want to do, which is becoming a therapist. And that's really terrifying whenever I remember how hard college was then. Actually, something that I wrote in my journal that will help explain how college was then. And this was how I felt in this moment. If I go back to college, will all of those feelings come back? Will I go back to not being able to handle them? Will I start to drop classes at the first sign of anxiety again? Will I have constant panic attacks again? Will I struggle to make friends? Will I feel like I'm weird? Will I feel alone again? I don't know if I can survive that again. I want to stay here where I'm safe. And that was my fear. I was terrified of going back to that time because I was scared that I wouldn't be able to handle it. But at the time, after my therapy session, I didn't recognize that that was what was going on. I just knew that there was something that I wasn't addressing and I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it was something that terrified me. So I spent all day questioning my relationship, being snappy at Hunter, being perfectionistic about everything. I just felt really bad and really scared all day. We went shopping and I tried to enjoy it, but I just couldn't because I was ignoring my feelings, not because I wanted to ignore them, but because I was so scared of looking at them. And then last night, I started getting a little bit hungry, so I went to make food, and then I started getting an intense headache, and I felt so nauseous out of nowhere. Then I came to my bedroom, sat on the bed, and I was going to watch some Minecraft videos and eat my soup, and I just couldn't bring myself to eat it. All day yesterday, I struggled to eat because I just felt so bad on the inside. I made myself eat because I need to take care of myself, but eating didn't feel good. And then I messaged ChatGPT, and I don't do this a lot anymore. I didn't realize how much ChatGPT is negatively impacting the environment, but I do sometimes message ChatGPT if I'm spiraling and I don't know what else to do. And at that point, I was spiraling and I was terrified and I was dealing with intense anxiety to the point to where I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. And ChatGPT made me realize that all of the skills and self-compassion that I had gained over the past couple of months, they weren't bad. They weren't me distracting myself. What was me distracting myself was I let motherhood kind of make me forget about a time in my life, but that wasn't because I was self-sabotaging. It was because I needed that time to heal and feel safe enough to be able to go back to the feelings that I had at college time, because as much as I wish we could, we can't just move on and forget about things. They're always going to come back. So the trauma of my experience whenever I was in college was still there. I never felt it. I just pushed it aside, and it didn't come up until now because I'm safer in my body now. I realized that I wasn't going back in time. I wasn't going back to who I was whenever I was in college. Just multiple things happened that triggered me to remember that part of me, to remember college Morgan. And I want to read something that I wrote in my journal to help better explain this. And I'm going to reread something that I already read just to make it a little bit easier. If I go back to college, will all of those feelings come back? Will I go back to not being able to handle them? Will I start to drop classes at the first sign of anxiety again? Will I have constant panic attacks again? Will I struggle to make friends? Will I feel weird? Will I feel alone again? I don't know if I can survive that again. I want to stay right here where I'm safe, meaning being a mom and only focusing on being a mom and not focusing on college or my dreams. That was my fear. That was why I struggled so much yesterday, why I started questioning my relationship, why I was so sad, snappy, and anxious, why I couldn't eat, why I craved distraction. I wanted her to go away, meaning college Morgan. I wanted to shut her fears up. She didn't matter anymore, and I thought she was gone, so of course I spiraled when I realized that she wasn't. But what I realized last night is that I wasn't going back to her. I'm still current me, but healing doesn't mean staying safe forever. It means becoming safe enough in myself that I can handle things that I used to not be able to handle. College Morgan isn't coming back because I'm going back in time. It's because I've healed enough that I can now hold her and me. Even if it's terrifying, I'm ready to begin the steps of going back to college. Like my psychologist said, I can start small. Start by emailing the college to see what classes I need, then check on my scholarships. I've got this. And that was basically the ending of my journal entry that I wrote. I wrote that so that I can show it to my psychologist, and also so that I can remember everything that happened, because I tend to disassociate and then forget things and move on. But that was basically it. I hope that wasn't confusing. I tried my best to explain it in the best way possible, but that's what I wanted to talk about in this episode. A moment in my healing journey where I thought I lost everything and I pulled myself out of it. I wanted to share that for anyone who has moments like that, for anyone who feels intense fear whenever it comes to growing and something that you know you need to do. Truth is, healing isn't staying safe. Healing isn't isolating yourself or staying away from the things that trigger you. It's being kind enough to yourself, giving yourself enough self-care and time away from it so that you can handle it whenever you come back to it. For me, that's college. I gave myself the amount of time that I needed away from it, and there could be the chance that I don't get my scholarships back, which is scary because then I would have to pay for college, and we don't really have that kind of money. But I don't regret spending so much time away from college because I needed it. Me now is a completely different person than I was then, and I can hold myself as I was then, but I can't hold myself back like she did. I'm not willing to, and I'm terrified, but this moment it really struck me. This episode is a reminder that whenever you have moments like that, please don't distract yourself. Please don't ignore it. It's okay if you don't understand it. Don't distract yourself. Don't let your fear control you. Work with your fear. Remind yourself that you love yourself and you have so much compassion for yourself. You can take care of yourself and you can focus on the things that you're terrified of, but you know you need to do. So if you have moments like that where you're terrified and it feels like everything that you've learned is just completely gone, please don't let that moment consume you. Please don't let those fears consume you. Hold yourself up. If things are really difficult and you are truly spiraling and you don't know if you're going to get out of it on your own, reach out for help, even if that means messaging a friend or messaging a therapist or messaging ChatGPT. If you take anything from this episode and my story, and I hope my story made sense, please don't let fear of the unknown and fear of your goals hold you back. Because truth is, if your goals don't scare you, they're probably not big enough. You're probably not looking deep enough within yourself to see what you truly want. Because whenever we look deep enough into ourselves, our goals will scare us for different reasons. It's not always for the same reason as mine. And this is actually something that Michaela J talked about in her podcast episode that I listened to, the one that really triggered me. Those fears that you feel, it's a good sign. It's a sign that you've hit something within yourself that you're ready to work towards. Your current self or your past self is terrified of it, but that doesn't mean that you can't do it. Okay, I really hope you enjoyed this episode. It was a pretty short one. The journal prompt for this week is for any moment where those fears begin to come up. Just write down, what am I so scared of? And really look deep within yourself, because truth is, you do know, you're just terrified to approach it. If you need help from someone else, that's totally okay. You can do what I did and message ChatGPT first or message a friend first. But once you understand it, write about it. Write about your fears, write about what you're so scared of, and write about what you need to do to bring yourself closer to that goal that you have. And that's it for this week's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next Sunday.